One language, one people, one impossible tower, and the moment that shattered everything. The architect who designed it heard words that turned his triumph into horror and confusion. His closest partner, Marcus, was shouting at him, but the sounds were chaos.
Why can't I understand you? We've spoken the same language our entire lives.
It was not madness. It was the judgment of God descending onto the tower. But why would God stop a perfectly united humanity? What was so dangerous about one language? To understand, we must go back to a time when all people spoke a single language on the plains of Shinar. Their master architect, James, had discovered a revolutionary technique, firing clay into bricks stronger than any stone. With this power, they would build a city and a tower that reached heaven, a monument to human ambition. Nothing seemed impossible. But God saw what they could become, and he stopped them. On those plains, a rare moment of human unity had emerged. No division, no misunderstandings, one shared purpose. At the center was a man named James. He saw a possibility where others saw only mud.
Look at this. Fire and earth fused harder than any stone. We can build beyond our ancestors' dreams.
He proved it with a brutal test. A brick hurled from a scaffold. The old clay crumbled. This one did not. Smoke billowed from the kilns as the new bricks were fired in endless supply. Nothing could stop them now.
We can build a tower to touch the heavens, a monument to human achievement.
The people believed him. The promise was intoxicating. One language, one purpose, and a method to make the impossible real. Construction began that same season, and the coordination was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Every worker knew their role. Bricks moved from hand to hand in an unbroken rhythm. The tower began to rise from the plain, and with it, human ambition climbed higher than ever before. Within weeks, the structure dwarfed any building in human memory. The tower rose like a mountain made by men.
Every brick is a step closer to the sky. We are not just building, we are defying the impossible.
The fired bricks locked together with mathematical precision, each tier perfectly level. Orders flowed without hesitation. A single word and 1,000 hands moved as one.
James, at this rate, we'll reach the clouds before the next harvest.
At the tower's peak, James felt the stone breathe beneath him, a living monument to unity.
What if we never stop? What wall could hold us back now?
A city grew around the base, feeding the tower with timber, clay, and unending labor.
They say even the heavens will envy this tower.
But beneath the harmony, a silent warning echoed. Humanity had never before dared this much. The tower climbed until clouds wrapped its peak like a cloak. It seemed the sky itself was within reach.
Let the world remember what we built. A name that will never be erased.
We have proven that nothing is impossible. This is our legacy.
The builders began to speak as if they had conquered fate itself, not merely stone.
Who needs the heavens when we can build our own?
The tower was no longer a monument to human skill. It was a monument to human pride.
Some of the workers say we should build a throne at the top, not an altar.
Let them dream. Our work speaks for itself.
The laughter on the scaffolding had turned from joy to something sharper, a dangerous edge. The tower had become a declaration of independence from any higher power. From beyond the clouds, God watched what they were building, a people bound by one tongue and one will. He saw not just a tower, but a humanity that, left unchecked, would bend the world to any desire.
If as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them.
The danger was not the height of the bricks. It was the depth of their united soul. Without limits, human ambition could corrupt as easily as it could create, an engine with no brakes.
What will they not dare, if I leave their language whole?
A humanity with no restraint, no barrier of understanding, that was a power too terrible to release upon the earth. The tower was only the beginning. In their hands, all reality would become raw material for unchecked pride.
I will go down and confuse their language, so they may not understand one another.
It was not jealousy. It was a fence around a fire too great to control, a mercy that would shatter their world to save it. On the scaffolding, the morning sun revealed no sign of the coming storm. James and Marcus planned the next ascent.
We'll need another 1,000 bricks by noon. The kilns must burn all night.
The workers are already straining. Some are beginning to stumble on the higher tiers.
Below them, a worker misheard a call for more mortar. He swung a heavy bucket as the platform shifted. The bucket tipped. A fired brick skidded and tumbled down the side of the tower into empty air. For a heartbeat, the entire line froze. The same mistake on a higher tier could have meant death.
Carelessness, but no real harm. Keep the line moving.
But what if one word, just one, got lost in the noise? What then?
We have always spoken with one voice. It has never failed us.
But the warning hung in the air unheard. The perfect machine had no tolerance for a single broken syllable. That evening, a solitary voice rose from the lower scaffolding, a question that should never have been spoken. Are we building this tower for God, or to replace him? The words spread like a crack through glass.
James, some of the men are saying we are provoking heaven, that the tower is an insult.
An insult? We are building with our own hands. What claim does the sky have on our ambition?
His answer revealed the truth. They had all begun to believe. Humanity needed no higher authority. From heaven, God saw the heart of the city, not a temple, but a throne built by human pride.
They have become one. Now, let us go down and divide them, before their corruption mirrors their unity.
James stood at the highest point of human achievement, completely unaware that the ground was about to dissolve beneath him.
Something feels wrong. Why does the sky look different tonight?
The decision had been made. Soon, language itself would shatter, and with it, the dream of a humanity without limits. That evening brought an unfamiliar silence to the construction site. For once, the hammers rested.
Look at what we've built. No one has ever stood this high.
Sometimes I wonder if we went too far. The sky feels closer than it should.
The sky is just sky. We are the ones who give it meaning.
But in the quiet, Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. The moon rose over the tower, and the whole structure seemed to hold its breath. For a long moment, neither spoke. They simply stood together, masters of a world that would never be the same.
Why does this silence feel like a warning?
But the quiet would not last. Dawn was coming, and with it, the end of the world they knew. When dawn broke, the world would learn the cost of building without limits. The dawn broke, but no ordinary sun rose over Shinar. A column of pure light descended from the heavens and touched the tower's peak. It did not burn or crash, but every worker below felt something shift deep inside.
Come, let us go down and confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech.
The light brightened, no longer gentle, spreading downward like a flood. It washed over the scaffolding, through the brick and mortar, into the minds of every builder. In that instant, the single language that had united all mankind was broken into countless pieces. The tower still stood, still gleamed in the strange radiance. But nothing would be the same. The judgment had fallen, not as a storm, but as a whisper that split the world apart. And then, from the top of the tower, a voice cried out, and no one understood. At the top of the tower, James heard Marcus speak, but the words were a storm of sound without meaning.
Takelot shu, navari torum kelra.
Marcus, what are you saying? Use words I know.
Men kalo, berati sum.
But the sounds that came from his mouth were completely alien. It was as if a stranger had taken his voice.
My ears. Are they broken? Why can't I grasp a single syllable? The sounds are twisted, like a song from a nightmare.
Below, the same nightmare was unfolding. Workers shouted and heard only noise. A brick slipped from a worker's stunned hands, plummeting into the dust. Tools clattered after it. The precision of 1,000 hands had been halted by a single, incomprehensible word. The rhythm of the tower was shattered forever. Two men reached for a handshake and found only confusion in each other's eyes. They pulled back as if burned.
Stop. Everyone stay where you are. Cease all movement.
His voice, the thread that once moved 10,000 hands, was now just another strand of noise.
They can't hear me. They can't understand a single word I speak.
Below, workers pressed hands over their ears, screaming in alien tongues at faces that no longer recognized their own. A mason's hammer slipped from a trembling grip, spinning down into the panicking crowd. The scaffolding shook violently. Men no longer moved as one, but as terrified individuals fighting to get away. Some, where a lifetime of trust became a stranger's threat. Brothers drew back from brothers, reading rage in sounds that made no sense. The once perfect machine of humanity ground to a halt, its gears jammed by a flood of incomprehension.
Dorvalek. Shundaha. Shundaha.
For the first time since the first brick was laid, the plain of Shinar fell completely silent, the silence of a world broken. James dropped to his knees and scratched the tower's design into the dust of the plank, pointing wildly. The workers gathered, stared at the marks, then looked back at James with empty eyes.
They cannot even read a drawing. Every form of connection is dead.
Marcus tried to rally a small team, pointing toward the unfinished arch, but his gestures only scattered them.
Kirashtan. Imbarak.
The group dissolved into argument. A raised hand brought only fear, a pointed finger brought only anger. James sat on the scaffolding's edge, his hands dangling uselessly over the void.
It's over. Whatever held us together has been ripped away. This tower is a corpse.
Marcus approached, and for a moment they faced each other. Then James tried to speak, but only a broken sound emerged. The master architect and his best engineer sat in the quiet, separated by a wall no brick could breach. But as the hours passed, a strange new order emerged from the chaos. Small clusters formed where workers found that they could still understand one another.
They're not rebuilding. They're separating into families of the tongue.
Marcus watched as men he had directed for years gestured to him, but their words were foreign. The tower fell completely silent. No hammer, no shout, only the murmur of a dozen newborn languages. James climbed down and wandered among the clusters, hearing sounds that once meant brother, now become noise.
We are no longer one people. We are strangers in our own city.
Groups began to gather their belongings, forming tighter circles, eyes already scanning the horizon. The sun set on a world that had been one, and rose on a world that would never be united again. The Tower of Babel stood no longer as a monument to unity, but as a pillar of division. The next morning, no hammer fell, no oxen dragged sledges. The scaffolding stood lifeless against the sky. James walked through the site, stepping over, dropped chisels, and spilled mortar, his footsteps the only sound.
This place once roared with purpose. Now, it's a graveyard of ambition.
High above, a loose brick crumbled from the unfinished peak and fell without a witness, dust trailing into the wind. The vast plain around the tower had become a city of tents, but now people lingered at the edges, staring outward. Cold kilns stood like ancient tombs, their fires extinguished as suddenly as the unity of mankind. Even the great wooden cranes were still, their ropes hanging limp, waiting for a command that would never come.
We could stay here, surrounded by the rubble of our pride. But the horizon is calling them away.
Marcus approached, carrying a small bundle. He looked at James with a question neither could voice, but both understood. The day's end found them all still waiting, as if the tower might somehow call them back, but it stood mute, a colossal tombstone. At first light, the group camped by the eastern kilns rose silently and began rolling their sleeping mats. They knew the time had come. Marcus carefully folded his stone-level and bronze chisel into a worn leather pouch, his movements measured, as if he were handling relics.
He's packing his tools. He's leaving, and I can't even whisper goodbye. Marcus, please, wait.
He turned, and for a heartbeat they faced each other across the dust. Then he shook his head.
Ram Shuka.
He turned east and walked, glancing back once, his eyes brimming with a sorrow that needed no words. James stood motionless, the dust cloud of their departure swallowing his feet and his hope. Around him, other groups gathered children, tools, and grain, then began drifting away like smoke after a fire. The tower, once their shared dream, now cast its shadow over a scattering people, a monument to a shattered unity. Over the following days, the exodus became a procession. Families with children, donkeys laden with grain, all walking away, group by group. The streams of people carved paths across the plain, never crossing, never returning.
Brothers, the tower is not lost. We can still rebuild.
But the sound of his voice was just another alien noise to the ears that had once hung on every word. By the end of the week, only a scattered handful remained. The old, the wounded, the ones too confused to choose a direction. The tower now stood over a ghost city, its kilns dead, its platforms silent. James wandered through the empty tents, calling out names that no longer meant anything.
These few faces, they look at me like I am a stranger. They can't even understand stay.
The ones who stayed were not a community, just islands of silence in a sea of incomprehension. The dream was dead. The Tower of Babel had become the world's loneliest monument. Then God's voice echoed across the empty plain, not in condemnation, but in explanation.
If they remained one people with one language, nothing they tried would be beyond them.
A world without restraint would become a world without mercy. The tower was only the beginning.
I confused their speech because I loved them. Unlimited power would have unmade their souls.
The scattering was a boundary, a fence around a fire too great to control.
Now they will learn wisdom through the struggle to understand one another.
What seemed a curse was the birth of 1,000 new ways to see the divine. James stood in the tower's shadow, and for the first time his face softened with the beginning of understanding. He had built to defy the heavens, but the heavens had intervened to save him from himself. The central question was answered. The scattering was not punishment, but a merciful protection. James looked down at his own hands, the same hands that had shaped the fired bricks, darkened with clay, now trembling.
We were building a throne, not a temple. He stopped us because he loved us.
His horror began to fade, replaced by a heavy ache of understanding.
This tower, it would have become our prison. We would have never stopped reaching.
He placed a palm against the fired brick, feeling the warmth that had once fueled his pride. Now it felt like a warning.
Marcus knew. Somewhere deep inside, he sensed this was wrong, and I silenced him.
The tower stood before him, no longer a monument to achievement, but a testament to a love that intervened before it was too late.
I wanted to reach the sky. Instead, the sky came down to reach me.
In that moment, James understood the truth of Babel. God stopped them not to destroy, but to save. He carried the weight of that love, a burden and a mercy. As the silence of the plain stretched around him, as the days passed, people flowed out in every direction, their new languages already shaping their futures. Families carried children and strange words toward distant hills, planting seeds of nations. From Babel's ruins, a mosaic of voices emerged. Each cluster a tribe, a future civilization. James watched, the weight in his chest transmuting from loss into a strange peace.
They will build their own towers, each in a tongue only they know. Perhaps that was the gift.
One people became a rainbow, names like Raka and Paji echoing through history. The tower stood as a silent sentinel over a world reborn in fragments of speech. No language would ever unite the world again. That was the protection it needed. James turned from the tower, not yet leaving but no longer clinging. The scattering was over. What remained was memory of unity and the promise of 1,000 futures. The sun began to set over Babel, painting the tower in blood and amber. A final, breathless farewell. James stood before it, his shadow stretching like a dark thread across the plain, anchored to the last brick.
This was not a failure. It was the most merciful failure in all of history.
The last of God's light withdrew softly from the unfinished peak, a gentle withdrawal, not a retreat. The fired bricks cooled. The kilns remained silent, but something new had been forged in the heart of the architect.
I will carry this tower with me, not as a monument of pride, but as a lesson carved into my bones.
He knew he would never build again. Some architectures are not meant for brick and mortar.
Maybe the whole earth is a tower now. Every tongue, a different stair, leading humanity back to the divine.
The story of Babel was complete. The question asked at the beginning had found its answer in the silence, and the world would not forget. James took one final breath, then turned his back on the tower forever.
Every step feels lighter. I leave not a tower, but a lesson.
He did not look back. The weight of ambition had been replaced by the gravity of understanding. The tower faded behind him, a silhouette against the dying light. Empty scaffolding, cold kilns. A single brick caught the last light, glowing like an ember of the fire that once raged. Humanity had been scattered, not as punishment, but as protection against its own unlimited ambition.
Now I understand. The silence between us was not a curse, it was a guardrail for our souls.
In the diversity of tongues, God planted the seeds of 1,000 cultures, each a reflection of his image. Babel is not about a tower unfinished, but about a mercy that prevented the greatest fall. And so the world learned that the strongest walls are sometimes built not of bricks, but of words. The tower is gone. The one language is dust, but the bricks still whisper a truth we cannot afford to forget. In the silence of that ancient plain, under a sky full of stars, God wrote a boundary with a breath. From that boundary, the nations were born. Not in punishment, but in the mercy of a Father who loved us enough to limit us. Every tongue that now fills the earth is a living monument to that mercy. We still build towers. We still seek to make a name for ourselves, but the lesson of Babel stands unshaken. Divine love does not always build up. Sometimes it lovingly tears down. That single brick, fired in human ambition, yet touched by divine purpose, remains the world's most eloquent teacher. Because God stopped the tower, we gained the world. The scattering was not the end of unity. It was the beginning of a richer, more beautiful diversity, and every language spoken on earth today is a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of God are not the ones that build, but the ones that gently, mercifully stop us.